Coming up on Mountain News at 5:30, 2 inmates escape a minimum security portion of the Casey County Jail. More on how they managed to get away. And President Joe Biden hosts the president of France at the White House. What they talked about coming up.
And chilly air on the way as we head into tonight, but looking milder toward the weekend. Latest breakdown, including rain chances ahead, as Mountain News at 5:30 starts now.
Dedicated to Southern and Eastern Kentucky, this is WYMT Mountain News at 5:30.
Good evening, I'm Steve Hensley. 2 women were on the run from a South Central Kentucky jail this morning. One of them has been captured. The women got out of a part of the Casey County Jail that's called a restricted custody center. It's a minimum security part of the facility. But what happened still caused a great deal of concern with school leaders. WYMT's Bill Pendleton spoke to the jailer and police about what took place.
The inmates were working in the kitchen area when they got out of an unlocked door around 4 o'clock Thursday morning.
I had a report around 5 a.m. this morning that they were seen here in the city limits, just about a block from here.
School leaders were concerned because buses were about to roll. They said they didn't want to risk an inmate getting on a bus, so they put the system on a 1-hour delay. The jailer said inmates Angela Mason and Chastity Burton were incarcerated for drug-related offenses and were allowed to be out in the community on work release.
Well, I think you should be concerned as far as armed and dangerous. We don't think they are armed and dangerous, but at the end of the day, they're still criminals.
Police say Mason was captured Thursday afternoon when she was spotted walking on Old Kentucky 70 West. Casey County jailer Tommy Miller told me that he did not really consider this to be an escape. He says that these 2 women were in a part of the jail that is not allowed to be locked, and he says both inmates were considered to be low-risk inmates that were allowed to be on work release. State corrections officials say the 2 were in the jail restricted custody center, which according to the state building code must have free egress or automatic time-delayed emergency release. Police did have some extra help, and they even mobilized a bloodhound.
At this point, we've got combined about 12 officers and deputies out on patrol now.
Police say they're not sure if the escape was planned by the 2 or if it was spontaneous. In the county, Phil Pendleton, WYMT Mountain News.
Sheriff Weddle says both women will face additional charges of escape first degree when captured.
Well, a chilly air mass continues to settle into the mountains this evening. You look outside right now from our camera in downtown Whitesburg. It's all peaceful. You can see the Christmas decorations already up there on the light poles there in the distance down Main Street. And the last of our sunset finishing up at Buffalo Mountain here in Perry County. 37 the current reading here, and we will continue to see those temperatures fall tonight, but not too much. Still in the 40s through much of the Cumberland Valley. In fact, Harlan's at 44, already sneaking into the 30s though, much of the Big Sandy, and we'll continue to drop those temperatures into parts of the Kentucky River Valley as we head through the next little while. Pinpoint Doppler's a clean sweep. In fact, to run into some clouds, you got to go into the northern part of the state or to our south across portions of Tennessee, Georgia, and South Carolina. I think we'll escape many clouds as we head through the nighttime hours, but a few will push in, along with some milder air. That'll keep things a touch milder, with temperatures steady, if not rising a touch, from freezing overnight. Details on when we return to some milder air in a few minutes. Steve?
All right, Evan, thank you. The Biden administration was dealt another setback in court in its effort to revive a student loan debt relief policy. A second federal appeals court rejected a bid to put on hold a ruling blocking the president's student debt relief policy. The court ruled last night that it would not pause a ruling from a Texas judge striking down the policy while an appeal of the ruling played out. The move sets the stage for the U.S. Justice Department to take the case to the U.S. Supreme Court, which is already looking at a separate request from the Biden administration to reverse an order blocking the loan forgiveness program. Now, the court said today the program will remain blocked for now, but the justices have agreed to take up the case early next year. About 26 million people had applied for student loan relief prior to the recent court decisions, with 16 million of those applications being approved. Federal student loan payments that had been paused during the COVID-19 pandemic were set to resume in January, but the Biden administration again extended the pause period as legal battles continue. The payment pause will last until 60 days after the litigation is resolved. President Biden's program would offer up to $20,000 of debt relief to millions of qualified borrowers. President Biden is hosting French President Emmanuel Macron for talks at the White House followed by a state dinner this evening. The war in Ukraine tops the agenda, but the leaders are also discussing climate change and trade between the U.S. and France. CBS's Skylar Henry is at the White House.
President Biden welcomed French President Emmanuel Macron for a state visit filled with pageantry and talks focusing on pressing global issues. At a Thursday afternoon news conference, the two leaders said they remain united with other Western allies against Russia's invasion of Ukraine.
We're going to stand together against this brutality. And we'll continue the strong support for the Ukrainian people as they defend their homes and their families and their nurseries, their hospitals.
We will never urge the Ukrainians to make a compromise which will not be acceptable for them. They are so brave, and they defend precisely their lives, their nation, and our principles.
President Biden said he would be willing to speak with Russian President Vladimir Putin only if Putin expresses a desire to end the devastating war. Mr. Biden and Macron also addressed economic differences as they tackle climate change.
We agreed to discuss practical steps to coordinate and align our approaches so that we can strengthen and secure the supply chains, manufacturing, and innovation on both sides of the Atlantic.
Macron and some European officials have expressed objections over subsidies for American-made climate technology in the Inflation Reduction Act.
The United States and Europe share the goal of making bold investments in clean energy.
President Biden said there are some glitches and adjustments that can be made in light of European concerns. The Biden White House will host its first state dinner to cap off this day of diplomacy. Skylar Henry, CBS News, the White House.
In a joint statement following today's discussions, President Biden and President Macron said the U.S. and France will, quote, continue to coordinate on our concerns regarding China's challenge to the rules-based international order, including respect for human rights, and to work together with China on important global issues like climate change. President Biden announced or honored those impacted by AIDS today. In a Twitter post, the president said, quote, on World AIDS Day, we raise a red ribbon to remember how far we've come, the work that's left, and those devastated by this disease. World AIDS Day is December 1st each year. It was founded in 1988. The Minneapolis-St. Paul area may soon experience its second nurse strike of the year. Last night, 15,000 nurses authorized a potential unfair labor practices strike. The Minnesota Nurses Association officials report the vote, which it said passed overwhelmingly, gives nurse negotiators the right to call a work stoppage after giving 10 days notice. The president of the MNA says working conditions for nurses need to be improved to help maintain proper patient care. A previous hospital strike in the area took place in September, but it ended after 3 days. Some of China's largest cities are easing COVID restrictions while police watch for any new protests. Thousands of people blasted the government's COVID policies over the weekend in China's largest public demonstrations in decades. The government may now be trying to diffuse public anger and prevent a larger outbreak of protests. CBS's Holly Williams lived and worked in China for 12 years. She shows us how the newest protests bring back memories of a much more turbulent time 33 years ago.
Down with the Communist Party, they shouted on the streets of Shanghai, an eruption of anger against a one-party state in power for over 70 years.
Takes courage to go out to the street to protest.
Zhang Lijia is a Chinese journalist based in London. She says the last time China saw anything like this was in 1989, when university students led demonstrations in Beijing's Tiananmen Square.
This is the first time since 1989 we've seen protesters explicitly calling for the downfall of the Communist Party.
This is the first time.
So this is huge.
This is huge, yeah.
Zhang led a pro-democracy protest herself in 1989 in the southern city of Nanjing and says she was interrogated by the police.
And how dangerous is it to hold a protest like that in China, calling for the downfall of the Communist Party?
Very likely those leaders who lead it chants will end up in prison or maybe even worse.
The Tiananmen protests ended with a ruthless crackdown. A bloody massacre carried out by China's military. But Zhang says the upheaval in 1989 forced China's leaders to give their people more personal and economic freedom. It's been a recipe for success until recently, with heavy-handed COVID restrictions forcing entire neighborhoods into quarantine.
Chinese people have a reputation being gentle or even docile, but the people are not stupid.
In 1989, did you learn something about the ruthlessness of the Communist Party?
Certainly, yes. Until the last minute, we did not believe that the government would really open fire to its own people. And the lesson is they would do anything to preserve their power.
Zhang Lijia told us if China's government is smart, it'll ease COVID restrictions. And there are signs that may already be happening. If it doesn't, she says, there will be more protests. Holly Williams, CBS News, London.
Coming up on Mountain News at 5:30, it's a spending strategy that's been around for a while, and now it's making a bit of a comeback. We'll break down the benefits and drawbacks of layaways.
Plus, warming up later on this weekend as some showers may move back in. That full breakdown coming up.